Like I said, it consumes you. Every second of every day for the last 2 fucking years, I kept myself in check.
Hey parents, Carmine here with your video review of The Darkness 2.
Oh, now it's back. And I can feel what it's doing to me.
To most people, the idea of good versus evil is mostly a theoretical concept, great for philosophical discussions over tea or wine, but with relatively little impact on everyday life. For Jackie, however, evil is slightly more real. For years, he has been fighting to keep the darkness in check. But a failed assassination attempt forces him to release this demonic entity in order to kill those who wish to harness the power of the darkness for themselves. This game is very violent, but the extreme violence is masked by the cartoonish graphics. The game is designed to look like a graphic novel, which creates an interesting effect. Still, it's not enough to hide the fact that the player will be massacring hundreds of opponents in ways that are often filled with blood and dismembered limbs. If the player goes through combat just using ranged weapons, the violence won't be too bad. Enemies will react and blood will fly, but it's not much worse than the average shooter. But the game encourages the player to go further. Almost every enemy killed will have a heart the player can eat to gain points. These points can be spent towards upgrading powers and abilities that make the player an even more devastating tool of destruction. The player can also perform melee attacks and executions that will result in enemies being torn in half. I played the game without performing many of these executions, but there are ample opportunities to pull these off.
Hellgate, huh? Thanks for the help.
One particularly violent scene comes almost immediately after Jackie arrives at a graveyard for his aunt's funeral. He manages to catch up to and subdue a particularly troublesome nemesis. Instead of just killing this enemy, he tears open the man's chest and rips out his still beating heart. Sexuality would not have been much of a factor in this game if it wasn't for one impossible-to-miss area. In one level, the player will have to infiltrate a brothel that is being used as a front by the antagonists. As the player wanders through the building for the first time, he will be able to see and hear women and men having sex. It's not like this content is hidden. Every player that goes through the campaign will see it. Other than this section of obvious prostitution, however, sexuality in this form is never a factor. Despite the unfortunately short campaign, I thoroughly enjoyed this game and would highly recommend it to the appropriately aged audience. Due to the extreme levels of violence and the scenes found in the brothel, we gave this game a recommended age of 16 years old. For the full written review, including the extra categories, log on to SideStoryGames.com.
Oh, you gotta give me a second, Jackie. I ain't been to the gym in weeks.